podcast is hosted monthly by John Kenny, CEO of Cotney Consulting Group and one of our Incubator Program sponsors. The Incubator Program was designed to partner emerging companies in the construction sector with mentors who will guide them to success. We will cover go-to-market strategies, operations and controlled growth, scaling, and more. This information is from our Incubator Program's hands-on training. We hope you enjoy the podcast.
Hello, everybody. Welcome back. This is the final and sixth episode in our great series we've been doing here with Furman. This one is going to be covering surety bonds. Surety bonds are contractor's best friend and nightmare, and I'm going to put it that way at the same time. If you don't know how to properly manage your business, surety bonds can really be a problem, but they are an absolute necessity as your business grows because they're going to be required, especially if you're doing work for public entities. Of course, you need them, and a lot of your larger projects as well, both public and private, and even with general contractors will require you to have bonding capability. So I'm going to turn this on over to my friends over here from Furman. Welcome once again to our series. It's been a great series, guys. Thanks so much for joining us on this.
Absolutely, John. Thank you for having us. Always a pleasure speaking here. And so this is an exciting topic, of course, especially for the incubator program, the companies starting out. This is something that most people aren't going to know about as they're getting into the business. Like you said, larger jobs are going to require it. So getting started on it early, I look at it like a credit score. You're going to qualify for a surety bond. And so I say like a credit score is actually taken into consideration in qualification as well. So certainly something that's very important in starting out and acquiring larger jobs.
I would say our portfolio of roofing contractors, when we look at bonds and bond, capacity and those that can qualify for them, what they're looking at is more what we consider upmarket work. So more stable work, cash flow wise. It's a little less competition because the barriers to entry are so much greater, and it's hard money because, like you said, most of them are on public entities. So we look at it like, if our contractors are going after bonded work, sure, there's a little bit more work in the beginning on getting qualified for those bonds, but in terms of what the competition is at the level where bonds are required, it diminishes us greatly.
I think it'd be great to, I know a lot of contractors that I talk to, especially, new ones coming in and also startups, they get confused about this being part of like an insurance portfolio, more of an insurance policy, and it's not. It's a separate. And so I guess it'd be great if you a couple things to cover would be wonderful. Kind of a 101 view of, what really separates this and makes it specific, and it's not an insurance policy. And also too, let's touch a little bit, about, you do have some personal guarantees on most cases, especially startup companies tied to this, and also the importance of managing, I would have to say, managing your projects extremely well, especially those that are bonded. So, kind of jump into that, and I think that'll be very informative to our folks out there.
Yeah, so in surety bonding, typically what you're going to see is the performance and payment side of things. And so what they want to see is it's somebody reviewing the financials of the company, typically working capital being one of the main things that they're looking at. So current assets minus current liabilities. And they want to see that you're able to complete that job on time, according to budget. You're not going to have any type of insolvency problems, not taking on too many jobs at once where you got too much material cost out. It's going to cause delays on another project for a GC. And so they want to see that you're going to, when they hire you for that job, you're not going to run into cash flow issues. You're not going to run into timing issues. And what they look at behind the qualification process is a number of things. One, like I mentioned on the financial side, working capital is very important. They're also going to look at credit scores. There's personal ties to it in the sense that if you have a wife, your wife and you both sign personally, your assets personally, and they want more of the current assets, so not even so much your home, even though some bonding programs can look at that, but they have to be able to have the financial capacity so that when you mention it's not an insurance program, when you qualified for a bond, the surety company would step in if something were to go wrong in that job, and they will be able to front the cost to essentially make sure that that job got done according to time if they have to pay another contractor to come in. But contractor themselves and the assets that they're putting up and what they're signing for personally is that if something were to go wrong and you weren't able to get this done financial capacity, on time and according to budget, or they went insolvent throughout it, then they could come after the personal assets. And so it's not insurance. It's a qualification from a financial standpoint that you're going to have to repay the surety company if something were to go wrong, but they help step in and put the cash up in the meantime if something were to happen.
Really, they're becoming your partner. They're a business partner of yours, and they're kind of like the bank in that aspect. Is they're going to financially back you up so that someone knows if you were able to get a bond that you have the wherewithal, liquidity to do the job and get it done and get it done. Now, one tip I would like to throw out there early: if you are a contractor and you have bonded and non-bonded work, if you have, and this comes from a lot of experience, trust me on this one. And bonding companies never like to be left in the dark. So if you do have an issue on one of your projects, you want to let them know as soon as possible. Not necessarily it's your fault, but I will tell you a lot of people do like to, as I call, chirp to your bonding company if you're not following what schedule they think they might be doing or you need to do and all that. So if you keep your surety company updated as to your progress, and you guys correct me if I'm wrong on this, it really builds for a great relationship in the future.
Of course. And building a bonding relationship, typically when we start out for contractors in their first bond, it's normally done at 3% on a fast track application. Typically, they don't have CPA reviewed financials. Typically, they're smaller jobs under $1 million, where really they're going to be trusting you off your credit and in-house financials and the personal assets that you're able to share with them. And they're trusting you. And so you build that up. Typically, seeing contractors graduate from that fast track application at a 3% bond to being able to build that down. So as you get into larger jobs, you get into tiered rating, and the stronger you are, the stronger relationship is with the bonding company, the better percentages of rates you're going to get, which then in turn helps you get more competitive on bidding and makes you stronger in the long run. And that's why we talk about some of these bonding jobs being used as a competitive advantage. Certainly can be.
What kind of talk a little bit about like the personal guarantee? You talked about having the assets. I know that as a company gets large enough and they have a great relationship, there are such things as a non-personal guarantee bonding relationship. The company may have enough internal working capital, but especially for our listeners out there, and probably for a good majority of contractors that are even in business today, there's still a personal guarantee tied to the bonding agreement.
Yeah, absolutely. And so a lot of them, as you're starting out, there could be, it was referred to as the Homestead Exemption, where, so they don't want your house anyways. They want your current assets. And that's why they look at working capital being such a positive attribute when they're looking to review. But you're absolutely your personal assets and your spouse's personal assets have to be signed, and they could be at risk if something were to go wrong on the job, that the surety company would have to be repaid. So there's risk in bonding. And so that's why they assume, and they being the surety company, which I say, tie back to their credit score, to call it the creditor, whoever it may be, they want to make sure that you're confident enough to put your own assets at risk if they know that they're going to step in and put the funds up if something were to go wrong throughout the process anyway. So really, there is risk in it personally as well, and the company as well. So
Sure. And pro tip for a contractor, if you're the owner of the company or you're got a partnership or however many people are bound to this, when you do your bonded work, you have to be personally involved in overseeing that project. If you have 10 projects going on and one of them are bonded, the absolute one you do not want to have any issues on is the one you're bonded on. So you want to make sure that you've got your crews set up right. You've got all your T's crossed, your I's dotted. You have to take some personal interest in this. This is a pro tip recommended to all business owners that are running roofing businesses or construction in general. These are not the jobs to just treat as a normal job where you're going to take, the word of your field or the word of someone else. You want to make sure they're performing because there's too much at risk.
Absolutely. And we talk about this, John, kind of as another tip to some of the contractors out there, right? So it's not an insurance policy, but with that said, knowing that you have insurance in the background. So typically from the material side, an installation floater on a bonded job going into it, if materials were to be stolen off the job, whatever it may be, you're fronting that money for the materials in certain cases, depending on the contract. You don't want anything to go wrong on that bonded job that could
Right.
cause because liquidated damages of the contract, whatever it may be. But you don't want to use the last 300,000 of working capital in the company or cash in the company that you could on materials, knowing that you don't have insurance to back that up. So it kind of ties in. Knowing that you have the insurance behind it on a bonded job is very important and kind of helps set your mind at ease for the personal assets that are at risk. So.
No, great information. What else would you, I mean, this is a topic that, again, is getting a little more advanced as you're getting into this incubator startup program as a company. This is not something you're doing out on day one, but what other advice would you give out there for our listeners?
Yeah, certainly in the contract, we talked about the liquidated damages portion, but and this ties back to insurance as well. In any job on an insurance policy for general liability, your work specifically is not covered under general liability. So your work, the resulting damage, bodily injury or property damage that would stem from your work, if you put on a roofing system and flooded a building, the resulting damage is covered. But your work itself, the work would get done at a didn't failed inspection on a bonded job, or get towards the end and say, hey, this isn't how we wanted it. The roof's ponding, whatever it may be, and you had to tear that roofing system off. Your work itself, the material, the labor that went into that, you have no insurance for that under any standard general liability policy. So sometimes contractors' errors and omissions policy would cover faulty workmanship in that aspect. And so that's another thing we always advise clients as they're getting into larger bonded jobs, to look at a contractor's errors and omissions for faulty workmanship policy, because those are some of the things that we look at that could go wrong on a bonded job. And it's not common, it's not a frequency thing that we see, but when it does happen, it could be a severity matter.
Excellent.
Insulation floater on the materials as well. We absolutely recommend on a bonded job.
What I would say for a roofing contractor just starting out, what I feel like most of the conversations when bonded work comes up in conversation, it seems like, say it's $1 million job or a $2 million job and it's requiring a bond. What we do when we get on the phone with our contractors that are looking at those is the bonding carriers are looking to make sure, like, okay, ABC Roofing is trying to do a $2 million job, and they're not just swinging for the fences and hoping this all goes well for a big payday, right? What they're going to look at is your character, your capacity, and your capital, most of which Tyler just talked about. But when we look at character, what we're looking at, and not us, but the bonding carriers, what they're looking at is make sure, are you in good financial standing? And whomever it is in your family or the partners, like you had mentioned, if they're all in good financial standing, that's important because it shows that, you have responsible payments over the course of your lifetime as individuals. You can carry yourself a certain way. On the capacity side, it's ABC Roofing is looking to do a $2 million job. Can they do it? Like, physically speaking, are they able to put together a $2 million job over the course of this contract the way that it's stated? And then the third thing is, so we have character, capacity, and capital. And the capital is where the financials come into play. And on the fast track stuff, it's a lot of information up front. The difference, I would say the largest, and correct me if I'm wrong, the largest difference, the fast track bond is kind of a streamlined, easy way, kind of bond 101, if you will, for those starting out looking to get a bonded job.
Typically up to $1 million. Once it gets over $1 million, they typically, that's when they start requiring more information. Go ahead.
So in the fast track bond world, the financials don't need to be reviewed by a CPA. Whatever you have, your P&L, those things should, with the fast track side of things, at least begin the relationship. Now, as you grow and your bonded work requirements grow, your bond need grows, what then we would suggest doing is moving toward, creating a bond line. And that's where you and Tyler had said, those bonding relationships become so very important because they will require more information, such as CPA reviewed financials. But what you're doing then is almost creating like a credit line the way that you do with a bank. So the bank underwrites you ABC Roofing and says, you know, based on all the financial information, we would allow up to $5 million in lending, right? Well, this is similar to what a bond line does, is we would allow a bond, letter of bonding for up to $5 million or $10 million. And what that's saying is we agree that based on the capacity and, you know, the capital that ABC Roofing has, we trust that they'd be able to complete whatever job up to $10 million. And if they don't, we would step in as, like you had said, kind of a silent partner to infuse cash flow wherever it needs to be able to finish that job. But as ABC Roofing needs to know that those bond companies are expecting that you feel personally responsible for those jobs. So like you said, I think that it's super important that bonding work can be incredibly lucrative. There's high margin, not a whole lot of competition, but it is so very important to make sure the ducks are in a row. So the relationship with the bonding team has to be good. And most of the time you see insurance and bonding kind of go hand in hand.
Yeah, and you know, you talk kind of a pro tip. So as you're starting out for your first bond, I mean, the bond underwriter is going to ask, what they're looking at is, they ask for a WIP for a reason. They want to see your current work in progress. So for your first bond, just a recommendation to make sure work at that time, to make sure the first bonded job goes smoothly. Make sure you don't have too many projects going on at a time where you're spreading yourself thin from a labor perspective and may have more cash flow out than you anticipated. And so that's always just a piece of advice for the first job. I'm not telling you to slow the whole business down, but they have aggregates for a reason. Like they talked about, if you have a $10 million bond aggregate and say it's a $3 million per project, per bond per project, and you could essentially, what they're saying is, hey, you could have 3 different jobs going on at $3 million a piece per bond, but they're not going to bond any one job for more than $3 million and aggregate at 10, whatever it may be. But the point is, they set that up for a reason. Is they ask for the work in progress for a reason. They know that if a company got into that bonded job and things were, you needed to respond quicker with more labor, with more capital for some materials, setbacks or change orders, whatever it may be. Just that piece of advice to make sure that you have the capacity at that time. So
Good, excellent points. Anything that we didn't cover that you would like to get out before we close out?
One more little pro tip, and I say this kind of in jest, but I'm also kind of serious. If you, ABC Roofing contractor, have never done a $5 million job, the likelihood of getting a fast track bond, like Tyler said, it normally goes up to $1 million, but say it's $2 million to make it more simple. If you've never done a $2 million job, the likelihood of getting a bond the first time right out the gate that you've ever tried to apply for a bond is very unlikely, because they absolutely want to see kind of the same way, like I said, credit is built, you know, start at a $500,000 job, move up to $1 million job. If you've done these kinds of jobs in the past, the likelihood of getting qualified for a bond is much greater.
they typically won't go 2 times your largest job, which I actually think is a little lenient. So for some contractors, if their largest job had been $1 million, not to say they couldn't qualify for a $2 million bond. We've seen it, we've done it, we've helped out. A little piece of, you know, I guess another thing I'd add in looking at and speaking with your bonding agent in different ways to make things work. If you're a contractor, if it is a large job, I'm going to share not to shy away from it. I've helped out companies who their largest job in the past had been $700,000, and they had a relationship with the townhomes. It's a simple shingle re-roof job, but it's a bunch of different buildings. Well, speak with your bonding agent to separate it into a few contracts if you have that relationship with somebody who's doing it, to kind of slim down some of the risk. Instead of doing one $4.7 million bond or whatever it may be, you do it in three different contracts. Once you get done with the first few buildings, the townhomes or whatever it may be, you know that those went smoothly. You go on to the next one, and it's a separate bond. Certain different ways to structure it. Now you have to have the relationship with the owner of the job, GC, who's ever is requiring the bond, to be able to do that in multiple contracts. But it's just something to be thought about and talked with if you're early on in the bonding stage, and not confident how it's going to go. So
That's a great tip. That's actually great advice. Don't, as they used to say in the old days, don't bite off more than you can chew, especially
Yeah.
when you're jumping into that bonded market. So one thing I'd like to throw out here is anybody that's in the Tampa Bay area, West Coast Roofing Contractors Association is having a live event at the end of October, the last Friday, and Tyler and Nick are both going to be there speaking. I will be there along with a lot of other great ideas and great presentations and training outside. You get more. So you've been watching this program. If you are in the Tampa Bay area, come on out and meet them live. I know they'd be happy to see you all there. And I think another thing we'll do, this series was very well received. I want to thank all our listeners. Really got some great feedback. I think probably a good live webinar coming up in the fall with the three of us on some of these hotter topics would be good for our audience. So we'll schedule that and let you know. So any closing words, guys?
So John, it has been a pleasure. Thank you for having us. And I do look forward to, for anyone joining in the live webinar, if there's any questions, we certainly, I know we throw a lot of information out in this podcast series and kind of just fitting information on a very short period of time, but taking questions and answering questions directly from the listeners is always something we like to do. So welcome anyone to join and throw any questions our way that you may have.
I'd just like to say, John, thank you for the opportunity to jump on this for the past couple months. It's been great. And thank you, like you had said, to all the listeners. Happy to answer any questions at the live one coming up here.
All right, sounds good. Well, that being said, I want to thank everybody for listening to this series, and we'll catch you on the next round, and hopefully we'll get to see some of you live at the West Coast event coming up in October. Take care.